So I've got my prayers of reparation, gallon of holy water. I got my phone going, Gregorian chant, stark naked, walk into the kitchen. My wife looks at me and she said, "What have I married?" And she just turned and walked away. I'm like, I can explain.
Welcome to the Conor Gallagher Show. We explore topics of substance from raising kids to spiritual warfare. This isn't just a show, at least for me. It's an ongoing journey of our second conversion. Life is short and eternity is really, really long, and there's no time to waste on trivialities. Let's dive into the essence of what truly matters, and let's do so right now. So, all right, Dan, take us through a perimeter prayer.
Yeah, I have it in my book, but it's also in the deliverance prayers for the laity. And this establishes a perimeter around the place. Prayer begets what it signifies. So words mean things. Ask and you shall receive. So it goes, Lord Jesus Christ, in thy love and mercy, establish a perimeter of protection around Conor and I, all of us here, all of our loved ones, those who pray for us and their loved ones. May thy holy angels guard us and all our possessions, establishing a perimeter of protection around us, rendering us immune from any kind of demonic influence. I ask that no demonic bondage, door, portrait, demonic entity, portal, astral projection, or disembodied spirit may enter a space of 100 yards in all directions of us. I ask that any demons within this vicinity, that any should try to enter here, be rendered deaf, dumb, and blind, that thou would strip them of all weapons, armor, power, illusions, and authority, that thou would bind, rebuke, and disable them from communicating or interacting with each other in any way. Remove them, sending them directly to the foot of thy cross. Jesus, Son of the Most High, I ask this in thy glorious and most holy name. Amen.
Amen.
So normally you pray that because this is you're the property owner, you're the business owner, so you have the authority, and the demon recognizes who's in charge.
That's actually something fascinating. I was talking to my wife last night in preparation for this. We found it interesting that as the husband and father, I mean, I knew that I had some kind of spiritual authority as husband and father. She knows that. It's no surprise to us. But that I had some kind of authority over the physical location. And she even said, well, that means the office as well.
Right.
And I had never even thought of that.
Yeah.
It's a fascinating thing.
Yeah. It's part of the rules of engagement. You know, when I wrote the book, it was like, how do I structure this? And I pulled up my Ranger handbook from my old military days, and in the first rule of Rogers' Rules for Rangers, it's a guerrilla warfare handbook for Rangers, Army Rangers. Every Ranger is bound by the rules and articles of war. And we don't understand that. We think if we come up with the secret prayer or it's a special, like this or that prayer, I can knock this thing out and move on with my life. The demon's going to yield or not yield for three basic things. One, he's going to ask, does this person have the requisite authority over the person in place of the object? That's the real key. That's the position we have to start from, authority. The demon's going to yield or not yield based on that. And number two is, what is the state of merit? You can have all authority in the world, but if you're contracepting in your home, or you have impurity in your home, or whatever, if you're not pure and virtuous, your prayers are not meritorious. So what is the state of grace? What is the depth of merit, or the depth of the state of grace, and what is the merit of the petitioner in relationship to the very first rule of authority? And finally, prayer begets what it signifies. How accurate, what is he asking specifically? So being specific in prayer is also very important. But those are kind of the rules of engagement that I've discovered. I mean, for me, it was kind of learning as we go, seeing a father's, or a husband's watching in an exorcism, for example. The priest, as part of the rite, lays his stole over the on top of the shoulder or the head, or he raises his hand in blessing, and the demon reacts. But seeing that same reaction, visceral reaction, bodily reaction, when a husband places his hands on his wife and blesses or commands, same reaction from the priest as the husband. Not a different reaction when to lay people. The demon sizes the room up, and he knows that structure very clearly.
Amazing. And I have so many questions about authority. I have questions about specific activities and exorcisms, but I had to start like this. Does your wife ever say to you something like, Dan, stop messing with all these demons and just come home?
Yeah, for sure.
Talk about that. I mean, not many lay people have the experience in these things like you do. So I want you to tell us about, how does this affect you personally? And then I want you to get into telling us about, your fascinating biography, your everything from your fighting background, your military background, and how in the world you ended up in all this before we get to all the detailed questions.
Yeah. So I was at the beginning in our local team. I was the dirty jobs guy, and really the work of in this business, the work is really the dirty jobs for the diocese. It's kind of the cosmic garbage men, if you will. As Father Ripperger says, working in this business, and I'm just a lay person that supports the priest. I'm hero support. The lay people work in support of the hierarchical church, the diocese, the bishop, and the mandated exorcist. But as Father Ripperger says, that working in deliverance or in exorcism specifically, it's like being at the end of a sewage pipe. You're downrange of sewage, but occasionally, that woman drops her wedding band and her wedding diamond into the sink, and it goes into the drain and it comes out on the other side, and you're like, wow, there's sometimes stuff comes through that's just fascinating and beautiful. You see the glory. The first time we were first session that we ever had, I was expecting Hollywood stuff, and really what I saw was just the power and authority of the church and the priesthood. And the sacraments and the holiness. When we talk about a priest's hands as anointed, going back to Exodus 28, anoint his hands. What does that mean? You see it in real space and real time. Cosmically, you get like when I was a pilot, we would fly with night vision goggles, and the whole world was green and dark shades of green depending on the light, ambient light that reflects. The new ones now, you'll see a red tone because they pick up heat, and so you see this varying shades, and you kind of start seeing the church, the mystical body, the Blessed Mother. You start to see the cosmic realm, the spiritual realm, in a whole different light. So one of the first jobs I had, I was just taking out. I was the guy that destroyed all the cursed stuff that we got, and so. One time we had these remember the cursed rosary thing that they've kind of going around Catholic circles. So somebody had shipped a case of these glow in the dark rosaries, and because Catholics love those, and so they shipped a case of these things to the local parish, the church, and they realized that they had satanic symbols on them. So so the church lady decides, I'm going to take these things and I'm going to just burn them in my fireplace, which was not the right thing to do. So her whole house smokes out. Fire department shows up. She takes them back to the parish. The priest says, he gives them to the exorcist. He gives them to me and take care of them. So I'm down in a public place down by a river, and I'm going to destroy these things. And I got Gregorian chant over here. I got holy water. I'm doing prayers of reparation. And ultimately, when you see what evil is, it's blasphemy against the true God, And so I'm burning these things. I got my vehicle over here. I've got the music's going, Gregorian chant. I'm praying. These things are taking forever. And all of a sudden, these dogs come running out of the woods, out of nowhere, and just started coming. They started surrounding me, and I'm just sitting there with a shovel, So I start fighting these dogs. I start praying to St. Michael.
Oh my gosh.
And the next thing you know, this lady comes out, kind of druid dressing, and she looks at me. The dogs she didn't say a word, but the dogs just jump in behind her and walk away, So wind shifting, I smell like smoke. I got a gallon of holy water, and I'm like, I'm not bringing this garbage into my house. You know what I mean? So I take the clothes and I take my holy water, dump the holy water on my clothes. I walk into the house, but I strip totally. And I walk into the kitchen. So I've got my prayers of reparation, gallon of holy water. I got my phone going, Gregorian chant, stark naked, walk into the kitchen. My wife looks at me and she said, "What have I married?" And she just turned and walked away. I'm like, I could explain. So you learn how to protect yourself. We have to.
You fight in Iraq and never have to come home naked.
I never came home naked in Iraq.
But you have to.
Yeah.
your first incident with the demons, you have to come home naked.
Yeah. Now, since then, we've learned, hey, this is your garbage. You destroy it. So now we just train them to do it. But back then, as our protocol developed, we learned the hard way how to do this stuff, So you have to be very careful. I mean, the demon recognizes us, our vulnerabilities. He sees us in our sins. That's what he sees. When we show up in his radar, it's kind of like that movie Predator, in a sense. He sees our sinfulness. That's what shows out to him. That's what stands out.
Yeah, actually, one of the questions I have later on is, what is the level? What's what's the role of a person's sanctity in an exorcism? So you're talking about laity, you're talking about priests, but let's go ahead and jump into that. What is the effect of somebody's actual sanctity? So, how is it that a holier person, lay and priest, are more effective in this whole thing than someone who's less holy, for lack of a better word? I don't even have the right words for this question.
Yeah, so we know that the exorcism is sacramental. It's not a sacrament. It's a blessing, if you will. It's part of the extension of the sacramental and prayer life of the church. And so the sacraments work ex opere operato and ex opere operantis, if you're familiar, if you remember your theology. Objectively, the work as it's worked, the sacraments do what they purport to do, as Christ says, and the church continues the work through the sacraments, objectively.
So a sinful priest still has transubstantiation done, right?
Yeah.
His holiness doesn't affect
Augustine battled the Donatists and said, but the Donatists said only the holiness of the priest depends on the efficacy of the sacraments. No.
Right, I remember
But
that.
subjectively, ex opere operantis, the work as it's working, we receive more or less grace. You have a lady goes and does a holy hour, she fasts for 12 hours, does a holy hour before Mass, she receives body, blood, soul, divinity. She receives Jesus objectively, but subjectively she receives more than the guy who's only there because his wife nagged him to go to Mass. He's only, he's got the football game and is listening here. He's not paying attention. He's checking the score on his phone or texting. They both receive objectively the same amount of grace, but one person receives more because of subjective preparation. So the sacramentals work a principle called ex opere operantis ecclesiae, the work as it's working of the church or in the church. And so, which says that the sacramentals specifically, the prayer of the church is effective based upon the level of holiness of those who are doing the work. And so that principle applies to exorcism. Exorcisms are more or less effective. I mean, it's the church, it's Christ who demands, but it's the holiness of the priest helps, and that helps the efficacy of that sacramental. And so, we see this in session. I've seen the demon will say, "There's lust in this room. Nobody's fasting," telling us, he doesn't want to give us why he's not leaving, but he smells it in us,
But doesn't he also lie?
He does lie.
So you really don't know whether he's lying or not.
It's interesting because we hear that a lot. And so it's kind of like, I was involved, not directly, but, we were the tip of the spear. We were in the cavalry, so we were the first unit that went into Iraq, ground unit in Desert Storm. And so we captured a lot of Iraqi prisoners. And so mostly voluntarily surrendering, but some not as voluntarily. But when you interrogate a prisoner, the military police will tell you, and law enforcement will tell you, there's a kind of a bell curve. At the beginning, they resist, and then they start telling you what you need to hear. But then they start lying just to tell you what they think you want to hear, so they can stop getting waterboarded or whatever they're doing. I'm not advocating for waterboarding. You know what I'm saying? I'm using my analogy.
Yeah,
so when a demon is in session, it's like they're being spiritually waterboarded. Now these are creatures far superior to you and I, far superior, but they're under duress by the commands of a priest, and so when they start to reveal stuff, and then over time, then they do deceive. And you take it with a grain of salt. I mean, at the end of the day, it's spade work. The priest just does the work, but they do start to reveal certain things to the priest at his command.
Does a bishop have more effectiveness in this than just a priest?
Right. We know theologically the bishop has the fullness of orders. And so a mandate, there's a big difference between just a priest and a mandated priest. A mandated exorcist, it's from the mandatum being sent, An academic should have a mandate from his bishop to teach. He bears the authority of his bishop to teach. He's sent by his bishop. So a mandated exorcist has a written sending and bears his authority as exorcist. And so he has the same authority as the bishop, but the bishop has the fullness of orders, and he is the chief exorcist in the diocese. So you hear criticism, a mandate is just a piece of paper. If you really want to know about exorcism, you need to go to an academic or a theologian. That's laughable. because that mandate, the demon will know if the bishop's in town or not. He'll know if the mandated exorcist is in town. I mean, our role, we would get the people ready for prayer. And many times we'd have to keep the priest, they would have to stay in the sanctuary because they see the vested priest, just the sight of the priest would cause a manifestation oftentimes in certain cases. So we would see, I would always hear is, oh, Father so-and-so, the exorcist is out of town, isn't he? Where's the bishop? I know he's not here. I mean, the demon kind of knows these things.
Amazing.
It's amazing. I'm going to tell you an amazing story. This is a true story from someone I know personally. Okay, so this isn't just, you hear this. You hear about the power of the priesthood. And most priests don't understand. They're like, it's like Samba, from Lion King. He's eating bugs, he's eating grass and nuts and berries. And the first time he eats red meat, he's like, this is what I was made for. I'm a carnivore, And so when a priest recognizes that power and authority that he has. So there was a priest who was asked by his local bishop to be the exorcist. And he was like any priest. Only an idiot would go, absolutely, this is what I want to do. Anybody that wants to get involved in this business is automatically disqualified. I mean, it's something that Our Lady calls you to. So this priest is on a priest retreat with all the priests in the diocese, and the new bishop says, we want you to be the mandated, I want you to be the mandated exorcist. I want you to pray about it. He said, if Your Excellency, I really want to pray about this. So over the course of this week retreat, he's walking through, and it's kind of in a desert retreat house, and he's walking through and just kind of contemplatively praying the rosary, and out of nowhere, out of the bushes come running, speaking of Samba, a wild boar, a javelina, right, which is a wild pig. And these things they're known to be violent.
Vicious.
They're vicious little creatures. Oh, yeah. So he's walking, and all of a sudden, here comes this wild boar, bum rushes him. He's just screaming and screeching and running right at this priest, right? Who was just asked by his bishop to be its exorcist. And this boar comes running at him, screeching and squealing horribly. So much so that another priest comes over and starts running over to see what's happening. But there are no trees. He's in the desert. So this animal, this creature's running at him. He can't outrun him, and there's nowhere to hide. He's in the middle of the desert. You can't hide behind a sage bush, So he just stops. He plants his feet and he puts his hand forward. And this thing is running at a dead run at him, angry. He puts his hand forward and he says, I command you in the name of Jesus Christ. I command you to stop and leave me alone.
Hey, thanks guys for checking out the Conor Gallagher Show. Please take a moment to like, subscribe, or comment, or whatever you got to do to support it. And I appreciate that very much.
And then he gets right up to him. I command you. It is not I who command you, but Christ commands you. And then when he said that, this wild boar, and another priest witnessed this and took a picture of it, stopped 2 feet in front of this priest. And he says again, it is not I who command you, but Christ who commands you. And then the other priest witness took a picture. Man. The boar actually bowed his head, dropped his knee, and knelt before the priest. Right? And I'm not making this up. I mean, these are two Catholic priests that saw this on a priest retreat, And so, and again, academically, Augustine would call this the analogy of being, that all creatures give us some insight into God. And so him invoking the authority of the priesthood, and not just the authority of the priesthood, but it is Christ. That's part of the language of the exorcism. It is not I who command, it's Christ who commands you, because the priest is in persona Christi. And so that was his red meat moment, and he's now an excellent pastor and excellent exorcist.
You read the stories of the saints, which I've done, being the CEO of TAN, and those kinds of incredible stories are all throughout the tradition. And we think they're legends or fables or myths. And I just love it when I see something happen like that in the modern world. We have lost faith in those types of abilities, particularly of a priest. Yeah. That's just incredible. Now,
so I give you a whole theology. I just gave an academic paper at the University of Twickenham in London, and on what it means to be sent, and we'll get into that hopefully today. What it means to be, what does in persona Christi look like in Scripture? But that explains it. I mean, that tells a picture, is worth 1,000 words. Yeah. And this other priest who took a picture of this wild boar, and think about it. think about what happened. And again, the demon sees the world cosmically. Think about the Gerasene demoniac. Where were they driven into? Wild boars.
Yeah.
Right.
That's interesting.
Right.
I didn't make that.
And the
connection,
wild boar was, I'm giving you a teaser on the primer. Okay. The wild boar is a symbol of the 10th Legion that were occupying Palestine at the time, the oppressors, right? That was their symbol. So the wild boar would have been the Gentile occupying force, the 10th Legion at that time in Palestine. The boar was also an unclean animal to the Jewish people. There's all sorts of symbolism. And my name is Legion, for we are many.
Wow.
And cast us into the swine. So all this, when the demon does this, he sees this world cosmically. He sees them with night vision goggles. He sees the cosmos that way. We just don't, because we like we like these simple realities. We like it very cut and dry and academic.
I'll never read that passage the same.
Yeah.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
Well, that's going to be the centerpiece of the follow-up book. So
the follow-up book to Liber Christo.
The primer. We're going to look at what this means and the wild boar, what symbolically what it means in Scripture. I'll probably tell that story. I'm going to weave in a couple of these stories, hopefully, so for the reader believes. Again, we don't begin with what the devil may or may not say. But when going back to your other question, when the demon affirms what we know to be true, one case we had the priest was invoking we were getting trashed. Okay, it's like a battle. It's like a boxing match. This is like a battle.
And you were a legit boxer.
So
when you say that, you know what you're talking about.
Yeah, it's like being in the ring. Yeah. No, it is. And I'm learning. I've got some young people from our men's prayer group coming, and a friend of mine's son that are jiu-jitsu fighters, and I'm learning jiu-jitsu from these guys, and I'm teaching them boxing. So I'm still in the ring.
That's
and
awesome.
I'm still getting, I'm getting tapped out on a regular basis. We're always just be a white belt. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But you got to stay hard to kill in the spiritual life. You got to work on that, And so
you got to stay hard to kill in the spiritual life.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah.
That's so good.
Yeah. So I want to work that in. And so you tell these stories, they reinforce what we know to be true. So the priest, we're getting creamed, we're getting pounded. And it's hard to describe what that looks like, but I can just tell you it's like getting pounded in the ring. I mean, now that I'm learning jiu-jitsu, I'm 58-year-old white belt, and it stinks. You're on the ground. It hurts. Your neck is in a really bad spot and you can't breathe anymore and you're getting ready to tap out. That's what it feels like spiritually. Mm-hmm. And so the priest just starts praying. The exorcist starts praying the litany of Loretto. And the demon stops and says, "Oh, her. Oh, her. Every time you call her, she comes. She comes. She wraps her mantle around you. She is the spouse of God." And I'm over here geeking out. You know what I mean? I got a doctoral thesis, a doctoral thesis dissertation on the power of the Virgin Mary. We had a guy that this particular case, I gave a breakdown of this is what you're dealing with. I'm a Cav Scout at heart. So Father, I gave him a basic Cav report on this guy. And so all of a sudden I said, here's the vulnerabilities of Revelation chapter 12, John chapter 2, the woman, right? The woman, the power of the Virgin Mary. He says, okay. And I forget about it. So I'm just there praying, watching, just praying for the priest, just praying the rosary of their fathers during the exorcism. And all of a sudden the demon jumps up, rushes over to this deacon and starts screaming at him, "I command you, stop reading that." And I was like, priest makes him be quiet, sits him back down. And then I walk over, I'm like, "Hey dude, what are you reading?" He said, "I'm reading Revelation 12, just like you told me." And I was like, "Wow, okay." So I go back, and next thing you know, demon pops up 10 minutes later, starts screaming at the guy, "Stop saying that stuff." Okay. So I walk back, go, "What are you reading?" "I'm reading John chapter 2, the wedding feast of Cana, just like you told me." Because again, that cosmic glasses, the three-dimensional night vision goggles the demon sees, he hears the pronunciation of the woman at Cana. We just celebrated this yesterday.
We did.
The third epiphany, right?
Yes,
the three epiphanies.
Yeah. And so it's there in the wedding feast of Cana where Mary really calls Jesus to his ministry.
Yeah.
And she probably was the one that pushed him back in his place in the finding of the child Jesus in the temple, basically saying, I can imagine her saying, "You're not ready yet, son. You got to come home and be quiet and humble and grow in wisdom," as Scripture says. But then, however many years later, she calls him to ministry. I want to ask you, because you said something just in passing. You said Our Lady calls us to this ministry.
Yeah.
I usually think of Christ calling us to a ministry. talk to me a little bit about how Our Lady calls us to this ministry.
Yeah, again, preface to
That's tied in with the wedding feast.
it's tied into the wedding feast. Before we get into the calling us, but at the wedding feast of Cana,
I really meant calling a priest to exorcism.
100%. He calls the priest to that, because they're special guys that do this. They're special guys. You have to be a little gritty. You got to be a little crazy. You have to be really anyone involved, but specifically the priest. Make me holy. Use me. Teach me the truth. If you've asked the Lord any of those three questions, He's going to send Our Lady down, and she's going to call you, especially the priest, to do this. But when at Cana, that phrase in John 2:4, there's no more wine, and He says, "What does that between you and I? My hour hasn't come." Right? That's seemingly a seeming rebuke, right? Therefore, they just so future Catholics would not give her any reverence at all. First of all, the title Gune, I go a doctoral thesis on this, so we can go all day on this, but. The title Gune, woman, is the only time in all of Scripture that title is ever used in the vocative by a son to his mother, woman. Like if one of your kids said to your wife, "Hey, woman,"
yeah, right.
I mean, they would learn corporal punishment very quickly. Yeah. So
actually, I have to interrupt. This is a terrible interjection here with this great topic, but there are these. At lunch, I'll show you, but there are these YouTube videos that are going around where teenage guys and the mom play a prank on dad.
Yeah.
And this is terrible. I do not recommend anyone do this.
Yeah.
But they punk their dad by the mom and teenage son have a little argument. It's fake. And then the son says, "Shut up, mom," just to see what dad will do. And these videos are hilarious because dad is disengaged, sitting on the couch, hearing
you think he's not listening, but they think he's
not listening, but he's just checking out. And then they hear son say, "Shut up, mom." And dad pops up, like a warrior, and charges the kid. And it's just video after video after video of seeing dad freak out about this. It's hilarious, and it's actually I kind of love it because it shows. Dads still have it in them. Oh, yeah. But what's funny is he starts running at the kid, and then mom has to jump in and say, "We were joking. We were joking." Yeah. They have to stop dad. Yeah. And he has to calm back down. It's quite hilarious.
That's beautiful.
But yeah, anyway, so I'll show you some of those at lunch.
Yeah, those are funny.
But where were we? Sorry.
John 2:4.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah. So that word woman, it's not a woman. Woman.
It sounds disrespectful. That was the point.
But it's linking to the woman, because we had just started in John 1:1, and the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, right? So we begin in the beginning, just like Genesis. And then there were 3 days, the next day, John 1:24, 34. There's 3 times it's mentioned in John 1, the next day. So now we're on the first day plus 3 days, and now the third day, right? So there's some kind of cosmic new creation imagery going on, as well as other things. Sinai is another one. The day, the third, is the only other time that phrase is used at Sinai, when God gave the law. So there's a new revelation of God. This is why in the wisdom of the church, this is another epiphany. Just as God at Sinai reveals himself to the people of Israel, and the rabbis saw the wash yourselves, and on the day the third, I will reveal myself. They saw this as a nuptial bath, Israel being wed to God as bride. And so now we have a new creation, a new covenant being brought about, and a new Sinai, a new revelation, a new epiphany, God appearing. And he calls his mother the woman. He doesn't call her by her name. She's never mentioned by name, but she's first billing, right? There's no mention of the bride. She's the first one mentioned. There was a wedding feast of Cana, and the mother of Jesus was there, right? And the mother of Jesus this. So she has the top billing. The father, as you know, the father is in charge of, the husband's in charge of the wine at the feast, right? Jesus is mistaken for the groom. He's asked to give the wine. There's no more wine. And so he says to her in English, "What is this between you and I?" Right? But the Greek is ti amoi kai soi. You could read it as a dative of possession. What is to me is to you. What is mine is yours. And the second half of that question could be read as an interrogative expecting an affirmative answer. My hour hasn't now come, has it? Has my hour now come?
It's a real question.
It's a real question.
It's a real question.
So
as opposed to a challenge, which we almost
it reads like a
is.
challenge, but what the literal Greek is, what is to me is to you, what is mine is yours, right? It has my hour now come.
It's almost like we are of one mind.
Right.
Has my hour come, Mom? It's kind of like that.
Right.
Powerful.
Has my hour now come?
Right.
And she initiates the hour in John's gospel as the passion, death, and resurrection. I mean, his suffering. And at that moment, and she turns, and I could show you in the Greek where there's no hesitation. She turns immediately and says, do whatever he tells you. Just like at Sinai, whatever he says, we will do, right? That covenant affirmation. And so, but she does this knowing that the hour, at this point, she will be physically separated from him, and he will begin his public ministry. He is now Epiphany, the appearance. He's now going to be publicly outed, and now beginning his own death.
Right, which the passion really, in a sense, begins.
It begins now at her instigation and with no hesitation. That's the brilliance of it. Zero hesitation. Zero hesitation.
It's incredible. So
and she's the new Eve too. I mean, all that is packed up in there as the second Eve.
So what's Mary's role in calling a priest to being an exorcist? Why is she involved?
Yeah, there's you guys have a great reprint of Alphonsus Liguori's. I'm going to plug Tan here.
Oh yeah, I love
The Glories of Mary.
Yeah, it's one of the greatest.
Yeah, so he plugs. There's one section he quotes. I forget who he quotes, but I cite this all the time when I'm teaching parishes on the Blessed Mother. He said he was talking to his seminary director. He said, "Woe to those seminarians who do not." He would ask them, "Who's your favorite saint?" Right, and it was very indicative, by the way. It's another great topic. Woe to those seminarians that did not have devotion to the Blessed Mother. It was inevitable, he says, that they eventually lost their vocation and left the priesthood. The ones that don't have that devotion to her. And so the ones that are most devoted to her, those are her special sons. You have another great one, Louis de Montfort's True Devotion to Mary. Yeah. And so those are two key books for Catholic. Every Catholic should have the Tan translation and version on their bookshelf, because those are two classics. If you want to understand the depth of it,
Right. Now,
so she go back to your question.
Right.
She calls who she wants. She knows. She knows she likes dirty faces and clean hearts.
dirty faces and clean hearts.
That's awesome. Who are blessed. But you know what I mean? You got boys.
Yeah, absolutely.
Dirty faces.
Right,
that are
right,
just
right. They're gritty,
torn, and then they get a hole in their knee, and they're just rough and tumble, and they're boys.
Yeah,
but their hearts are pure. That's who she's looking for. Those are your best exorcists.
It's awesome. All right, so I want to elevate out, and I want you to walk us through both what I'll call, using my civil lawyer hat, both the procedure and the substance of exorcism. And so, in other words, procedurally, and in civil law, procedure is just as important as substance. If you screw up the procedure, he's going to walk, right?
Yeah.
And we know jurisdictionally how submissive the demons have to be and whatnot. So procedure is really important. So, but walk us through, an exorcist gets a call, whether he's in the diocese, or maybe you can use the example of a priest who's outside the diocese, because that invokes more procedural process that he has to go through. What's that process going, and then like, what's the actual exorcism like? Most of us have never participated in something like this. So walk us through it.
Yeah. So I'll start with the inverse again. When the demon reveals things, it's under duress. He doesn't do it out of that he wants to, any more than when I was in Iraq, the Iraqis wanted, I was in an attack helicopter. They didn't want to be seen by us because our job was to shoot them and do bad things to them. So the demon doesn't want to go, but he'll say things under duress. I learned this lesson. We had an African priest who wasn't incarnated. He was just visiting, and he says, and so he wants to pray over a person that we find out later was possessed. We just jump in and start gunslinging. That's not the way to do it procedurally. You have to have jurisdiction, because the demon, remember Father Ripperger's definition of a demon is a lawyer from hell.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's in your book. What a glorious description.
He's a rules
of
guy.
Something so hellish.
Yeah. He knows the rules. Well, that's what it says in Revelation 12, that the devil stands before us day and night, accusing the brethren. He's accusing us of all of our sins, all the times that we've committed sins and abandoned the protection of the graces, the sacramental grace of, and committed sins, even small sins. He's accusing us of those things. Mm-hmm. So this particular guy, this African, was gunslinging it, It's kind of the way they do it over there. So he starts praying and starts, praying minor exorcism and manifestation and all that. And the demon says, "What's your name?" And I was like, "Father, I've read this story. Don't give him the name, don't go there. Just don't talk to this guy." And he says, "I'm Father so-and-so, priest of the living God, and I command you have to leave this person." And the demon just says, "You have no authority here." Wow. That was it. It was it. So he knows who has the structure. So the first thing when a call comes in, the way in our system, the Liber Christo system, there's a mandated exorcist, there's an assistant that's a case manager, case facilitator, program facilitator, case facilitator who receive it. Usually it's a deacon. It works best if it's a deacon. They take the case and they run them through a protocol for us. They'll do a 30-day prayer prescription. That's not. It's a lot easier than say Exodus 90, which a lot of guys are starting today. Exodus 90 is brutal, right? So when I hear priests say, "Oh, that's too hard," you can't expect someone to pray the Angelus 3 times a day, and not look at social media. And I always say, okay, if you think this is too hard and not pastoral, have them do Exodus 90, because this is only 30 days. Exodus 90 is for 90 days, and it's cold showers, no coffee on Wednesdays and Fridays, no the cessation of the marital act, hardcore fasting, cold, go ahead and do that instead. Like, okay, we'll do this, So you're trying to impose order to them. And then what we actually use this book, the manual for our phase 2, a catechetical portion. And then we work with the local priest, because every priest can do minor exorcism, but there's procedures that we go through before you go through you finish phase 1, and that's a diagnostic. Is this is it psychological? Because I know priests that they'll pray over all sorts of people. You show up and they'll pray over you. They don't care. And if you say the devil's talking to you, it must be the devil. Well, not necessarily. It just might be you. You might just need to see, a mental health professional. You might need to work on some of your trauma, whatever. So not that we don't look, the old saying is you don't look for a devil behind every rock, but you also, if you look for the devil, he will find you, So you have to have a healthy balance. So we don't just assume everything is diabolic. So the first phase kind of ferrets that out.
All right, wait. So sorry for the details. So a call comes in, and then there's a case manager, and you were saying that was like a deacon? Usually
it's a deacon. Okay. Most of it's a deacon, but it can be a good lay person.
So that person is doing the first triage. It's like triage or something?
It's like triage.
Okay, so they are talking to this are they talking to
they'll sit down with them and we always want the spouse there, because it's a familial thing.
But how'd they get the call to begin with?
Oh, I've been called in. I was sent to go see this person at the mental hospital, and I asked her, "Well, what do you want? Why did you call?" "Well, I looked online and I looked up exorcism, and there was a curandera that charged $600, and then I heard you guys were free, so I just called the Catholic diocese." So
right.
Yeah, I mean, so some people, or sometimes it'll go through the pastor.
Okay, so a pastor, I would think that's somewhat common. A pastor is talking to somebody in his parish, or he's
giving spiritual counsel, or there's something going on in the home,
and he thinks it's beyond his capacity. So then he would call.
He'll refer them to the diocese.
Your group.
Well, he'll call the local diocese.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then how does your group get involved?
So our teams at the local level would, a case facilitator would get them started. Here's the prayer regimen.
And this is only for your diocese, but doesn't Father Ripperger go into other dioceses? Then
that's different. Okay. So when a diocese exhausts it, or they Father Ripperger only gets the worst of the worst cases sent from different parts of the country and even from other parts of the world. They just can't. It's just they're stuck. And even then, you're talking about cases of possession, or religious orders will send priests or religious sisters over, and even then, there's a transference of authority on paper. Mm-hmm. That we transfer authority from my diocese to the Archdiocese of Denver, and then where Father Ripperger has a mandate.
Interesting.
Yeah. So there's a legal line.
Right.
Yeah.
I see that.
So you see the interplay of the demon in this one particular case, and I've heard it many times. I've seen deacons go step out of their lane of authority and start commanding the demon and tell the deacon, "You have no authority here.
Right.
Stop.
Right.
I'm not leaving." So when I've seen where, for example, a case of high level affliction, they went to you got to go to confession to the not to the exorcist. They go to the local priest. There's a brand new priest, associate pastor, and every time she goes to confession to him, she gets wiggy. She gets all nervous and doesn't want to go to confession, and the demon lights up. She goes down the street to another church, and there's an older pastor there, and he hears her confession, gives her a blessing. Nothing happens, and so, well, we would think, oh, well, apparently this young priest is much holier than the old priest. And then, no, it's not. The young priest is her associate pastor. He's part of her authority structure. The demon's going to have to respond to that. So you can kind of get a little battlefield intel on that as well. It's not sure proof, but that it shows that the demon follows those lines of authority.
All right. So then a deacon, however it gets to him, or a case manager, or somebody is assessing the person. They basically do an interview with the person.
Right.
They sit down with this
we actually have an intake interview.
An intake interview.
Yeah.
Okay. And do you do that sometimes?
Oh,
or
yeah.
just only deacons? Okay.
No, yeah.
So you will sit
The
down.
deacon's nice because the deacon has a deeper union with, as an ordained ordained deacon, he has a deeper union with the local church and also a layer of a protection. So it's better to have deacons work in that facility role.
All right. So will the diocese call Dan Schneider on the phone and say, "Hey, we have some case. We want you to meet with this person"? Is that how it works?
If you're the facilitator for your diocese,
let's say, and you've played this role before,
right? Locally, yeah.
Okay. So somehow somebody calls you, and then you drive to this person's house and you sit down and do an interview with them?
Never.
Okay, so how's that?
Yeah, you don't go to their house.
Okay, well, how's that intake then? Okay.
We always do it on holy ground.
Okay.
The biggest trashing I ever took was because the deacon thought the person can't come to the church, so we have to go to her apartment. And no, it was a disaster.
Yeah, you went to the enemy on their territory.
Oh, for sure. You have no right. You know that. You go to
makes
Chicago
sense.
and you walk to the wrong neighborhood with the wrong colors,
Okay.
you're in trouble.
All right, so that's good. That's what I mean by procedure, getting all these details.
Yeah.
So they meet you at the church,
You meet on holy ground.
holy ground.
Yeah, you meet at the diocese or parish, and you do an intake. What's going on? You do just kind of verbal intake.
You see, right off the bat, though, to just a bozo like me say, well, if the person's possessed, they won't show up. Like, why would a demon show up?
Well, that's the interplay.
They're
Because
going to their own execution. Like, why they even come?
Well, because they reach a point where they can't take it anymore. They can't take it anymore.
Who's they? The person?
The person. And so that's the thing, is that we think we need to pray for them to free up the will, and that's just not true. All liberation, even exorcism, in this sense, all liberation is self-liberation. Even when you need the authority of the church and the mandated exorcist, there has to be an active agency in the person's liberation. You see, so they have to be actively, they want to be free. And so that's part of the process. This is why you got to come to us and we don't go to you, because you have to engage your will. We've seen liberations happen when somebody says, I'm just done, and they force themselves into the church.
So if somebody, and I know that there's distinctions of oppression and obsession and then full possession. So even if somebody is fully possessed, it's not like they're walking around 24 hours a day with their head spinning around. I mean, it just manifests at certain times. So they still have some kind of willpower when the demon's not fully active and they're
Right.
able to seek help. Is that the right way to think about this?
Yeah, what you have is it's an increasing presence and control interiorly. So at the low levels, at the normal things that we deal with are temptation. That's the ordinary, and then the extraordinary is activity of the evil one. There's oppression, obsession, and then possession. And so you're seeing an increasing influence interior-wise. So by the time you get to here, it even may come and go, but there's often, by the time you get to possession, you have a constant running dialogue, diabolic monologue. Constant.
Okay, so if somebody's fully possessed, they are constantly dialoguing with the...
No, usually there's a constant projection of dialogue, unless it's uncontested. There's a whole lot of...
What does that mean? Constant projection of dialogue.
Constant diabolic monologue. I mean, just a constant barrage. Anytime the person tries to step out of line,
All right, so if a person's fully possessed, then they're possessed all the time.
Yeah.
Like, okay.
Well, no, I explained in the book, there's some transient possessions. There's, we call that a transient, there's a classic possession, and then there's transient possession. Transient possession it's kind of like the peanut butter allergy. The possession is based upon a certain activity or a certain pact that was made. And so just like peanut butter, if as long as you don't eat peanut butter, you're not going to have any reactions.
Right.
So sometimes there's something more specific and it comes and goes. So sometimes they're perfectly fine, but they engage in that activity.
So if somebody's fully possessed, can they still seek help?
100%. Yeah. Yeah. But those are actually more rare than you think.
Right. You're actually, the intro says it's like 3%.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's very small.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a fraction of a percent.
Right.
It's less than one, what was it? Father Ripperger just
he had some real stats on it.
600 cases.
Yeah, I think this is kind of interesting to just say. In 2015, the Deloran priest, that's his community, had 2,000 contacts. We discussed the cases of 600 people over the phone. We saw 150 people, and those 150 people, only 3 were possessed. So 3 out of 150 or 3 out of 2,000, however you want to look at it, really was rather small.
Really 3 out of 600, because 600 cases were accepted as potential.
Right. And you you did an intake of those people. Right. And then he says here on the next page, I made a note of it because it was fascinating. Only about 1/3 would actually go the distance and become liberated.
Yeah.
So only 1 out of those 3.
Right. It's like the soils, a third of the soil went on rocky ground, thorny ground, bad soil.
Right.
And only, so it really is a lot of them, they just don't, again, there has to be an active agency. A lot of people just show up to the diocese and say, I want to be free of this. I want to be demon free. And so I can go on and kind of live my semi-pagan, somewhat decent, somewhat sinful life, but I just don't want this constant harassment. And that's not enough.
It's not enough.
Yeah, that's why reconciliation is union with God. Union with God the Father through Christ. And we know as Catholics that can only come through the sacraments. There's a sacramental reconciliation with the Father. And so oftentimes it's a very long process. It's not a one and done. I mean, so many exorcists make this mistake. They just pray over them, or they lay people because I have this charism, I have this gift, and I can drive out demons. No, you're not. There's a big difference between a manifestation, an extraction, and liberation. Remember, my name is Legion, for we are many. And at that time, a legion, a Roman legion in that time of Roman history was about 6,000. So you might get an extraction at a charismatic prayer meeting, or you're going to gunsling a priest that just lets them. You show up and you start not praying over him. So not gunslinging. We don't want to gunsling. We don't want to gunsling.
So
because it's dangerous.
You do the intake. You sit down with this person on holy ground, sacred ground, and you're talking to this person. What kind of questions are you asking them to get to the bottom of what's going on?
Well, we have set questions that we run through, but basically you're looking for, and it will. Our first phase is of regimen, a 30-day regimen of prayer discipline that imposes a prayer on them. Most people, if you really look kind of a sub theme in the book, it's ordering life to prayer, praying. Praying the hitting the 6, 12, and 6. That's important because we found that the demon responds to the imposition of order as much as to the prayers themselves. Mm-hmm. So the demon responds to authority. Part of the imposition of order is getting the house rightly ordered under the right authority. But so that prayer discipline is very important. And in that will tell us by the end of that prayer discipline, it's going to pattern either psychological oppression, obsession. It's going to pattern out in a certain way because we've done so many cases that it patterns a certain way, and it's pretty predictable. And so, but you're looking for triggers. Someone says, I trigger every time I go to Walmart. Well, so do I. I hate Walmart. It's creepy, But if you're triggering every time you see a Catholic priest, you get blasphemy thoughts, and
So you're asking those kinds of questions?
Not really. At the beginning, we're just what do you want from the church? I've had people, like when I went to Germany, we were training teams over there. A lady drove a couple hours because she heard that I was going to be there, Father Ripperger's guy, whatever. And she's gone through this, she's gone through this, tried this priest and this charismatic group, and she tried all these, and I tried living in this community, and nothing works. So I usually say, okay, what do you want from the church? Now, this is not our formal one, but this is when I'm dealing. What do you want from the church? I want liberation. Okay. What are you willing to do to be liberated? I'm willing to do anything. Okay. That's what, generally, I'll do anything. Okay. Then my third question is usually, what is the definition of insanity?
Mm-hmm.
All right. You want liberation. You want the church for liberation. You're willing to do anything. And what is insanity is doing the same things over and over, expecting different results. And so you've got to reorder the life to prayer. And people push back against that. And one of the hardest things besides hitting the 6 o'clock, most people are not morning people like you and I. Most people don't want to get up early. It's the social media fast. That's the hardest one.
Really?
Yeah, that's really one of the hardest ones.
God, it sounds like a vacation for me.
I know, right? If I could turn my phone off for
So can you give me some examples of actual questions on the intake form?
Yeah. So you do a small one there, and then at the end of the first phase, you kind of do intake, and then once they go through the manual, then we're asking questions. So before we go to prayer, you're trying to identify, is there actual preternatural activity in this person's life?
What questions would you ask to get there?
We ask for a narrative from them. What's going on? You're looking for triggers, spiritual triggers, and you're asking questions. So they fill out a narrative, why they think this is going on, what they're asking of the church. You got to think of all between here and Charlotte, how many billboards, and how many of those billboards are lawyers.
Mm-hmm.
So the job of the lay team members is to protect the exorcist and protect the diocese. So why do you want to be liberated? Why do you think you need to be liberated? And you're looking, and they're explaining it. And you get a family member collaborating that there's something extraordinary here going on.
Does that mean supernatural?
Supernatural or preternatural.
And is that usually sights, sounds, things moving? What does that mean?
Yeah.
What are examples of the most typical supernatural things happening in a house?
Anything from doors, but these are things that's why we get a narrative statement from somebody else in the home who verifies. So it's not just the person making it up.
Right.
Doors clanging, music, scratches on the body. There's all sorts of extreme things that could take place. So someone else has to see them for us to verify that these are actual preternatural.
So it seemed, I would have thought that if there was those kinds of supernatural manifestations, scratches on the body, that almost sounds hardcore serious, like possession. So, but that could happen even in obsession and oppression, something like something less than possession. You can still have these supernatural manifestations.
Really more preternatural, more diabolic. Yeah, you can have that. And so you're trying to get it verified with another witness. Again, you're asking the church for help. This is what you're saying is happening. You got it verified from a family member. We get the local priest, because we always stay connected. Because that's one of the problems of other models, that there's no aftercare. Mm-hmm. So even if the person's liberated, what do we do with them? They become kind of groupies. They want to hang out with the priest. No, we work with the pastor. So the pastor writes a narrative statement. This is what is going on with my sheep. This is his sheep. Mm-hmm. It's not my sheep or the extra sheep. It's this guy's sheep, this local pastor. And then we have a physical, they have to get a physical to show that they're physically capable, and also a mental health evaluation to show that, and to collaborate that there's things that are not explainable, a diagnosis. Imagine this phone call coming into the diocese. So, hi, my name is so-and-so. I work for this law firm. And you realize that my client committed suicide. They died, and my client, actually, they're not suing you. It's the family members, because you've convinced them that they were possessed. Did you not even bother to ask? Did you know they had bipolar? Did you know they've had a lifelong mental illness? Did you know that they had a heart condition, and they were in constant? They had back pain, and they had lived their whole life with chronic pain, and they were at the point of mental breakdown when your guy convinced them that she was possessed. You see?
Oh yeah. So that makes perfect sense.
So everything is documented. Yeah. So you talk about procedure. So everything. By the time we go to phase 3, which is minor exorcism, we have verified signs of preternatural activity, some level. Primary or secondary signs.
Tan Books is here to help you become a saint. That's why we do everything we do. We publish thousands of titles, literally, that are specifically written to help you get to heaven.
Everything from the lives of the saints to the writings of the saints, the greatest doctors of the church, the great spiritual masters, Alphonsus Liguori, St. Francis de Sales, and so on. So please come to tanbooks.com and find the book that God wants you to have right now so that you can get to heaven and be a saint for eternity.
We've talked about the procedure a little bit, the intake form, the jurisdictions that's required. When you get to an exorcism, what is that like? What's the actual substance of it? And am I using the word exorcism correctly? Is exorcism, does that include just deliverance when it's obsession and oppression, or is exorcism technically just for possession?
It's what we would say deliverance. It's really more minor exorcism. There's minor exorcism and solemn. And solemn, what you do, so you're looking for secondary signs, and some of those are taken from Father Jordan Allman's book on spiritual theology. Secondary signs, primary signs are right out of the rite of exorcism. And so when you have those verifiable signs, when the priest sees those, and after going through minor exorcism, occult knowledge, which includes foreign languages, I had a lady was screaming in Spanish during the session. And so me and another team member were taking her to the car. I started talking to her in Spanish, the demon was screaming, esta hija es mía, this little girl's mine. She's mine. Get away, So I started just talking to her, convert, in Spanish, and she says, "Oh, I don't speak Spanish. I have a Hispanic last name, but I don't speak Spanish at all."
Wow.
So the languages, preternatural strength, preternatural strength. You use kind of the classic sign.
But you walk into so you have a session. You're going in.
You're in minor exorcism.
Okay, so
that's our phase 3. You're in minor exorcism.
Now, does a priest have to be there for that?
Oh yeah, no,
Okay.
100%. Yeah,
Okay.
the lay people were hero support. We're just there to pray for the priest and watch.
So minor exorcism versus solemn. Just kind of nail this down. Minor is just deliverance prayers,
Mm-hmm.
but compared to solemn, give us that clear distinction.
So solemn comes from the rite of exorcism. It's a solemn rite of exorcism. It's a former one written. The Prima Tundra is written by Charles Borromeo. It's been around since the 1600s. The old ritual, and there's a new one now too.
But a minor exorcism then would just be basically praying over somebody.
Yeah. So the priest will pray. He can pray chapter 3. What's called chapter 3. Chapter 3 is chapter 3 or chapter 2, depending of the rite of the solemn rite. And to pray chapter 3, you need that is a reserved prayer. You need permission from your bishop. A lot of priests get in trouble.
Mandate from the bishop.
Every priest can pray chapter 3 of the rite of exorcism. They can pray it privately, but they can't pray it publicly. Lay people cannot pray that prayer at all. So a priest need to pray it publicly on behalf of the church. He needs permission from his bishop. But even in minor exorcism, the bishop would have to grant him permission. Remember, we're dealing with a lawyer from hell, and he knows.
Yeah.
He knows that chapter 3 is like it's like a high flash weapon. You know what I mean? It's a weapon that goes off in the battlefield that everybody goes, "Wow, there's a big signature over here. Something big got dropped over here." So everybody sees it. So if you're not working under the right authority, a priest could get taken to the woodshed. I mean, I've seen priests get taken to the woodshed for using that prayer with that specific prayer, chapter 3. So chapter 3, minor exorcism. There's Father Ripperger's book, Minor Exorcisms for Priests. These are unreserved prayers. So some of these prayers are St. Cyprian, St. Basil, Chrysostom's. There's some minor exorcism from the East, and other types of minor severing prayers, that sort of thing. But these are prayers, and sometimes that can be ejaculatory prayers on behalf of the priest, invoking authority and that sort of thing. But they're normally chapter 3. Sometimes, basically, most guys would, what we do is just you do minor exorcism. You'll do litany of saints, prayers of protection for everyone, for the team. Everybody gets their assignments.
Now, is this person like laying on a bed or sitting in a chair or kneeling?
Usually sitting in a chair. Yeah, okay. Yeah. And then you need a family member there for handling, because sometimes we used to in the old days, but now no anymore. They have to do their own. By the time they get to phase 3, they don't need restraining. By the time they get to prayer, they're strong enough. Their will is strong enough to resist the manifestation. And so we have a woman always present, a female present. Usually it's best to work with couples. A female's present so she can, in a court of law, say, "I saw that priest's hands at all times."
Yes.
Because I mean, I've had them
Obviously.
come out of exorcism, and the woman say, "Did the priest molest me? Did everybody, put their hands on my body?" Because the demon will project.
Yes.
He'll recall memories from the person and project that, and now say the priest would molest you. So we have eyewitnesses there, really to protect the exorcist and protect the church. And if somebody physically standing right next to the exorcist in case the demon tries to attack the exorcist, but those are really rare. Normally it's just you'll do introductory prayer. I mean, you're going to do the same thing either way. Litany of Saints, and then 3 repetitions of chapter 3. Maybe a couple other prayers the priest wants to pray.
So let's jump to Solemn.
And then once you see one of the preternatural signs, one of the
They're in front of you.
Primary,
You see something supernatural happen.
Right.
Like what?
Well, the aversion to the sacred. Those are the 3 primary: aversion to the sacred, occult knowledge, which includes foreign languages, and then supernatural strength or preternatural strength, which includes shape-shifting, other things.
Shape shifting.
Right. So you'll see their bodies take a different form. You see,
Like what?
You see the movie Tremors?
No.
Okay, so you'll see like a snake moving over the body, like serpent, inside, like there's something inside the body, complete change of face. I was at a conference early on. I was speaking at a conference, and I'm with my laptop, but I'm doing a PowerPoint, and I look over and I see this lady there. She seemed nice, and then she looks at me, and I'm just teaching, and all of a sudden my computer starts going blank and turns green, and so I just started praying those little binding prayers, and it kind of went away. And I look back, and her face is like a chipmunk, and I thought, that cartoon,
Right,
look at your eyes again.
right.
And I
Rub
just
your eyes.
ignored it and just kept teaching, and then afterwards I was with Kyle, and she walks over to talk to us, at the coffee station there, and her face looks like a chipmunk. But 5 minutes prior, she was a really kind of pretty young lady, in her 30s or whatever. And then she walks away, and Kyle said, "Did you see the chipmunk?" I said, "I guess I did." Yeah. So you see radical facial changes. That's kind of the strength. Of course, the super crazy stuff that you see and you hear about, that kind of stuff. So you get one of those verifiable 3 primary signs, or 4 depending on where you're educated, but those primary signs. And then you go to the bishop. The exorcist goes to the bishop and says, "We have verified signs, and here it is." And then the bishop gives him a written authorization to perform the solemn rite. And once that starts, it's game on.
I've heard.
You can't change your mind. You
right.
can't say, "Okay, I changed my mind. We were wrong with that." It's a race from that point on. It's a battle. It's
Now,
a commitment.
obviously, all right. So I think what a lot of people would want to know, including myself, is how much of this is like the movies. Okay, we obviously all know the scene where the head spins around. We see the vomiting. We've seen levitating off the bed. We've seen all these things in movies. We've seen people climb up walls. Like, we've seen real things in Hollywood. Is it like that or not?
I heard Father Ripperger was asked this once, and he said that it's more terrifying. If Hollywood really described what it was like, it would scare people. It might scare people too much. Now, I'm not saying sometimes it's very calm, because the demon can be they're open, outgoing, and sometimes they're very quiet, and they don't. And the priest really has to work to get him into the ring. Other times they're very loud and vociferous or whatever. So it's similar. You see those things, but they're not always that common. Usually because our system, by the time they come to prayer, the person has more self-mastery and they're in a habitual state of grace. Because that's another problem is that, again, before we started the protocol, I would locally, we would get the person ready for prayer. And I would always ask them, "Hey, did you go to mass this weekend?" "Oh, no, I didn't. The demon won't let me." And then you pray over them. And it's a bloodbath, cosmically and spiritually, but it just gets worse because the demon says, you have no right. This person's not in a state of grace. They missed mass. The demon always drives us to the subjective, but he works only in the objective. He'll entice you to break the law, but then he's the first one to stand and accuse you. That's his name, the accuser, right? So so anyway, so you're looking but you're looking for one of those three signs, and then everything is documented, and then it goes to the solemn session, and then you're using the ritual. I mean, the priest might add other things, other prayers, litanies, and readings from Scripture, but you're going through the solemn rite.
So, have you seen supernatural stuff yourself?
Yes.
I mean, can you share any of that?
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
Or is it? Yeah. What can you say? I mean, I don't want to pressure you, but
yeah. No, I mean, you see stuff. You got to be cool on the outside. You know, you have to just, like I was a helicopter pilot. You know what I mean? You gotta be like sunglasses. You got your sash. You know, there I was upside down and inverted. You know, air medals dangling in my face. You know,
awesome.
Yeah. So, but no, so you know, because oftentimes they're just kind of parlor tricks. You know, but crawling up the walls, sliding through the room, the stuff that you kind of see, some of the classic stuff that happens. That's shocking to see at first, you know, but for the most part, those aren't really as common either. It's really, and the most amazing things is the conversions that come about, the holiness of these people by the end, you know.
I would think that if somebody was an atheist and they went into one of these situations and they saw somebody climb up a wall, they would automatically start believing in God.
You would think. But, you know, what's the old saying? To those who believe, no explanation is necessary. To those who do not, none sufficient, you know. But I had a call once. It was a Sunday, you know, after Mass, and you're going to have a nice dinner with the family. So one of my team members called and said, "Hey, Dan." I'm like, "Hey, what's up?" And yeah, there's so-and-so is here after Mass, and they manifested right outside the sacristy. And they said, she kind of turned into she said it was amazing. She just put her feet against the wall and her arms like backwards and started crawling up the wall. And right in front of this priest, the guy was already ordained like a month. And so I'm like, okay, well, Father's here and he wants to talk to you. So this guy's all, hey, I'm like, well, what happened? He tells me, and I said, and when you put your hand out like this, was it worse? She goes, oh yeah, why? I said, because your hands are anointed, Father. Tell so the charismatic ladies and all the church ladies run over and they start trying to lay hands, and my team members were like, hey, just put your hands together and pray quietly, you know. And the priest came over, and so I kind of walked him through how to stop it. I said, Father, this isn't a place. This isn't where we're going to do this battle. So you just get it to shut down. And I hung up the phone. I was like, my first thought was, oh, my wife's making meatloaf, man. It sucks to be them. You know, it's good to have my day off, you know. Yeah. And then I just had this very maternal, feminine voice say, you get your butt over there. It's like, crap. So I said, all right. So I went over there, and the priest said, everything was over. And
was this the Blessed Mother or your wife?
The Blessed Mother.
Okay.
Yeah.
I thought your wife was
like,
what are you doing, Dan?
Yeah.
Go to work, Dan.
Yeah. So you know, and the priest said, why did this happen? I said, well, you know, he's testing you. But he wants you to see the power of your priesthood. He wants to see that what an anointed hand, the fact of anointed hands. You have dignity, that you are recognizable. You put a heat signature into the cosmic realm because of your anointing. You are a priest forever. And the priest was blown away. He said, I have to help. I have to do more, because I had no idea that this was out there. It really woke him up. So if a demon does manifest, it's always for a salvific purpose. It's always for a salvific purpose. And that purpose might be for an atheist to go, whoa. Or an unbelieving husband whose wife is suffering to wake up and go, I need to really go back to Mass. I need to become Catholic, and I need all the sacraments. You know?
So that's a powerful statement. If there's a manifestation, it's for a salvific purpose, and that goes into my very strong belief into divine providence, where these terrible things that happen, it's not just that God allows these things, but he places them in our lives on purpose so that it can bring salvation to us, witnessing or suffering the injustice from another one's sins. Like God, he had this incredible algorithm to where this jerk was going to end up in my life and sinning against me, and I'm going to suffer that. And that's for salvific purpose for me. And so that just resonates with me when you say there's a salvific purpose for this manifestation.
And that's the danger of people that sensationalize this, you know, because it's focusing too much on what the devil's doing. We lose sight of Christ. Really, I say in the book that the demon is tertiary, you know, in spiritual combat. What's most important, our focus has to always be on Jesus Christ.
As in the third.
The third. He's third in line. In terms of the equation, if you're walking down your
Jesus
checklist,
and then the person and then the devil, is that what you mean? Or-
Jesus is number one.
Right.
Number two is, what are the obstacles to grace? What is blocking me from union with Christ? What are the habitual mortal sins I need to shed? What are some of my sinful habits? What are some of the psychological compatibility, symbiotic kind of attraction that keeps this demon attracted to me? Where's my psychological traumas? What are the obstacles, both physical, moral, psychological, emotional? What is keeping me from union with Christ? And then you start to see, okay, what is the enemy doing?
All right. In regards to the activity of an exorcism in the real deal, why does Latin work better than English?
Yeah, so there's three sacred languages, and it's linked to the cross. When Pilate put on the cross, INRI, we see on our crucifixes, Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews, and then he did it in Hebrew, Greek, and Latin, which are the known languages of the settled world.
Wow, I've never connected it with the cross.
Yeah, perfect. Everything goes to the cross.
And actually, my subsequent question, and you just answered it, but does the Eastern churches, does Greek have as much power for them as Latin has for us in the Western church?
I've never been involved. I've done some work with Eastern priests and stuff, and they do a different book, and they use Greek, and I would imagine it would be because those three languages
right there on the cross.
The Old Testament was written in Hebrew, the New Testament written in Greek. The Septuagint is still, I would argue, sacred scripture. It is in the East, and it was to the fathers, and then Latin is the official language of the church. And so you have the Eastern, the New Testament, the Old Testament, both written in Greek, the Septuagint, the Old Testament Greek Bible, and then the Latin, the official language of the Western Church. So those are the sacred languages. And so the demon does respond to Latin because the Latin language is more pleasing to God because it's the language of this church.
Which makes it more heinous to demons.
Which makes it more effective. It makes it more efficacious because this is a language that is more pleasing to God. It's a sacred language. It isn't magic. We have to understand this isn't white magic. We fall into this trap of magic. It's a language that's sacred. And in that sacredness, it's more pleasing to God.
Let's turn to demonology or the theology of angels and demons. And this is closely related to the activity of an exorcism, because what is a demon able to do to a person's mind and heart? Like, are they able to read the person's mind? Are they able to put images or thoughts into their head? I mean, if they can make a person speak other languages, they're obviously able to get inside that brain somehow. So help us understand that.
Well, let's start with the extreme case. A manifestation, what we mean by manifestation is the demon appropriates the bodily senses of the person. So and properly speaking, when you even in a case of possession, what the demon possesses is the body. This is why I quote Father Gabriel Amorth.
We published his biography, by the way.
I did the developmental edits for it.
Yeah, thank you.
It was a great.
I just wanted our audience.
Yeah,
to
I want to make
that.
sure we plug it because it's the official biography.
It's the official one,
yeah.
And like all of his stories and everything are great. But to actually have his biography,
it's great because you understand who he was as a human being, as a priest. This guy was fought against the fascists. He battled against he was a political. He fought in the political realm as well before he became a priest. He was a Mariologist.
He's a gritty, dirty hands and clean heart.
Dirty faces and clean hearts. Yeah. All right, I've lost track. What was the question?
Sorry. Yeah. So demonology, right?
Okay, and so that's why Father Moore says one good exorcism, one good confession is worth 100 exorcisms. Because technically speaking, he said confession is stronger than exorcism because in exorcism, all you're doing is liberating their body. In confession, you liberate the soul. And so the demon takes claims, and he holds in the body, particularly the parts of the body where the sins were committed, where he entered, so he holds in the body. So exorcism, confession is more powerful than exorcism. This is why we have to get holy, or die trying. It's really just deep dive into the sacraments and virtue.
All right. Can a demon put thoughts in my brain?
Okay. Yeah, that was the question. So the importance of growing in virtue and custody, what we call custody of the mind. or the imagination. So if you look at, this is why I do a section on Thomistic psychology, which is what one of Father Ripperger's.
Would you call it epistemology?
You can call it Christian anthropology. You can call it a Christian epistemology, Thomistic psychology.
Because it gets into the Thomistic understanding of how a thought is occurred,
Right.
The phantasm, how the brain comes up with a thought.
Right. But if you called it epistemology, people would say, "Oh, I don't want to read that. That sounds painful."
It is painful.
Yeah.
I never really liked it.
Yeah. So I was not trained as a Thomist, and I'm learning because Thomas, this is how Father Ripperger kind of got drawn in and called in, is that an exorcist kept consulting and Father said, "Well, why do you keep asking these questions?" He was a seminary professor, and he said, "Well, the way St. Thomas explains the human person, that's the way the demon understands him. So the more I understand from you how St. Thomas," and so we have three faculty. We have Augustine said this, St. Augustine. It's appropriate that God, who is three but one, would make man in his image and likeness one but three faculties. So you have the higher faculty of the intellect and will, the lower faculties of the passions and the desires, appetites, desires and appetites, and then the middle faculties of the memory and the imagination. Right?
It's really right out of Aristotle.
Right. Yeah. He builds on Aristotle. You're a Thomist. You understand. So he's building on Aristotle's understanding.
I wouldn't call myself a Thomist, but thank you for the flattery.
Let's
keep going.
You're an amateur Thomist, like I'm an amateur Thomist. Yeah. And so the lower faculties we constantly have to mortify against. St. Augustine talks about the uti and frui, and how we get everything that was ordered towards our good, preservation of our species, etc., food, sleep, sex, these things, even after the remission of original sin through baptisms, are still disordered, and it's a constant battle. Things that we were supposed to enjoy, frui, we now use in an unholy way, or tempted to. And so we have to constantly militate against those lower, the appetites and the desires. So that's a constant thing. Probably, 30 minutes or an hour after our death, I'm going to stop, some of these cravings. So we're constantly militating against that. But the middle faculty is where the battle takes place. The memory and the intellect, the memory and the imagination.
And Father Ripperger talks about basically data sets in the brain.
Data set. Exactly. That's what the demon has access to. He's there. My data set is different because my experiences are different. So
if I've seen something and this gets into repressed memories, which is actually a fascinating thing, right? Because that data set is there. The demon's able to access it. It's like a computer that has stored memory.
Yeah.
And so he's able to get that data point and then build on it, torture me with it,
twist it, distort it, use it against you. Because and here's the analogy that I use is when you go to take I always do when I'm giving talks at parishes. Okay, if you put you're old enough, you can drive a stick, right?
Yeah,
I'm assuming you're a man's man.
One of my kids drives
right?
a stick.
You want your kids, especially your daughter.
All my kids have to learn to drive stick. And in fact, at my daughter's wedding, when I was praising her, Mary Gallagher.
Yeah.
Just
fantastic
incredible.
human being.
And I said, the only time in my entire life that I was a disappointed father and was really upset with her was when I tried to teach this woman to drive stick shift. I mean, it was like, how did this brilliant person become such, an incapable human being?
Yeah.
It's the only time I was really just and we had serious conflict. So my wife had to take over the training.
Did you do like a paternity or a maternity test or paternity test on this one?
This person?
Yeah.
She's good at everything. Yeah. And we've stalled 20 times in a row. So my wife had to take over. Sorry, that was a little detour.
So, but if you think about when I go to especially in parishes, okay, how do you put your car in reverse? And inevitably, everybody goes like this, right?
Yes.
My first car was a 1950 Plymouth, and it had 3 on the tree.
Yeah.
So it was,
I drove one of those one time.
Yeah. So, but if you noticed it described that, you have to use your body. How do you turn the hot water on in your shower? Some people it's this.
Right.
Sometimes it's this, but your body. So the body. The memory is embedded into the body. It's bodily. That's the locus. And so our bodies remember things.
So is the way to think about this is, the devil creates nothing. He can only distort that which God already created. So in order for him to have something to work with, we have to already have that data point in our brain.
Right.
And he takes that and can distort it. So which is an argument for somebody remaining pure and innocent and never putting those, violent or lustful or, whatever images in one's mind. And I hate only just using those examples.
I'll give you I'll give you two examples. One is a priest called me and said, "Hey, I got this parishioner and he's struggling. Can you talk to him?" So yeah, sure. So I call the guy and we talk, and he worked in IT. He works in IT for the FBI. And so he's not an agent, but he's the guy that verifies child pornography.
I knew you were going there. Yeah.
He verifies.
As soon as you said FBI,
somebody has to prove that. I mean, it can't just be. So he's told me
they have to actually look at it. Not only that, I worked for a federal court for federal judge clerking, and we had quite a few of those cases come through because our brilliant Supreme Court has actually said that digitally created child pornography is okay. It's an expression of the First Amendment because it's creative. Because you can do that and make avatars, they actually have to have technology experts, usually with the FBI, come in and prove that this child
is an actual human
being, which the burden that places on the prosecution to actually bring in the expert witness and prove that this little child is real as opposed to created in some guy's garage. It's horrible, the burden that our Supreme Court has said. And it was Anthony Kennedy, this Catholic
guy, right?
Who wrote this opinion saying that he cannot
today's the last day of our Catholic president too, by the way.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. It is. Yeah. So anyway.
So Kennedy writes this thing.
Yes, he wrote it and says that he says, I cannot say that this digitally created child pornography is not an expression of the First Amendment. And so, but the ripple effect of that is causing people, including the judge I worked for, they have to actually look at the thing. And I never forget, the judge I worked for, a brilliant, holy man, a great Catholic. And we had a trial, and this was a child pornography trial. And you can appreciate this because of the topic. We're talking about the data points in somebody's brain.
The data set of your
data
memory.
set in somebody's brain that the devil can use, right? Well, the law requires that a judge in a trial place, judges have to see the evidence. They actually have to see the evidence, okay? They can't just ignore it. So the judge is sitting there and the screen is here and the jurors have to see it. The clerks did not, thankfully, because I'm just a bystander and just helping the judge. And so they have to put this image, and it was an interesting moment. They said, okay, we have to now put this image of this child pornography on the screen. The jurors have to look at it. The judge has to look at it. And this is what the judge did. He said, okay, go ahead. He looked away, and the screen is like over here. He looked away and he said, okay, please place the image on the screen now. And they said, okay, the image is on the screen, Your Honor. And he went, thank you. And that's what he did. Wow. And he had to do that. You can't allow yourself. He had to put his eyes on it and move his eyes away. And one of the things they found, Dan, is that this is on topic. This is actually on topic with really what we're talking about. They found that prosecutors, and this is happening today, they found that when you're working for the U.S. Attorney's Office or the District Attorney's Office, you find these areas of specialty. Like you work on white collar crime, you work on drug cases, or you work on child pornography because you have to develop a specialty to win. And so these men and women or prosecutors were working on child pornography cases for extended periods of time. Dan, they would become addicted to it. Yeah. That's how powerful it is.
Yeah.
A neurologist went into prison and filmed the brain of child pornography predators, who are in there for child pornography. They filmed their brain and measured the activity of the brain when this person is viewing child pornography, and it is lighting up more so than a heroin addict when they're high.
Yeah.
It's more powerful than a heroin addict who is high. Imagine being able to print heroin out of your printer at home, or just taking your cell phone and clicking a button and having cocaine instantly. That's what's going on with child pornography. So now prosecution offices, so what they first did is they said, we can't put men on these cases. We have to put women prosecutors on these cases because the men were getting addicted too quick. These are good men, but they have to look at child porn every day. And so, I mean, you've got to be sympathetic to this man. This is his job. So then women started getting addicted. And so now the policy in a lot of U.S. Attorney's office is you have to rotate these people.
Yeah.
Which I understand why, but now everybody's having a little bit of exposure to it. There's just no good answer.
No, there's no good answer.
But the point is, the demon he is using that data set that's in your brain.
Yeah.
And this is why I think it was Aquinas who said something to the effect of, it really only takes one sexual sin to kind of develop an addiction.
Right.
Because it's there and it's there forever.
Yeah.
So the demon, I understand, back to our topic, I'm sorry for that rant.
Oh, no, I get it. This guy had watched millions of images, millions, because he was the guy. And he was like, but if I don't do this, I mean, I put so many criminals away because of this, and I feel like I'm letting God down.
Yeah, back to the FBI.
Yeah.
This is the FBI guy. Sorry, keep going on.
So I was like, hey, you got to stop. You got to find, you don't have to bury this. This is not your job.
You got to find another career.
You got to find somebody. You got to find another career. And you got to really pray. And you really have to spend more time in prayer. And mental prayer helps purify those images. And it's going to be hard for millions, let alone one or two. Guys that have overcome addiction to pornography, it takes often years, if not lifetimes, to get those images purified. Because that's what the enemy has access. He can distort it, he can spin it, he can manipulate it.
So this is what I don't understand. So I get that a demon can use images that are in our brain.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, because in a sense, there is some kind of physical something in our brain, right? I mean, that image is trapped in our brain somehow, or a memory of, an argument, or, there is some physicality somewhere lodged in the brain somehow, some way. And so the demon is working with something physical. Is that fair to say?
Do you want to bring order and clarity back into your family life? Hey, I got 16 kids and I understand better than anyone we need to do that. So my wife and I, Ashley, we developed a 6-part family management system to do just that. And it's based on concrete business tools and principles that you can apply in the day-to-day running of your household. So please come to wellorderedfamily.com, check out our tools, our books, and most importantly, our one-on-one coaching so that we can work directly with you and customize a program to help your family get to the next level.
Yes, because we say the demon traffics in the senses, and some are sensitive to holy water, touch. They're tactile. Some it's olfactory, smell. Some it's sound. They're very sensitive to Gregorian chant or sounds, and so the demon traffics in these in our senses. Because remember, he only possesses the body, technically speaking, but he can manipulate the senses of the body.
Yeah.
And he can, so for example, I was about a year ago, I was at adoration. I was praying to me and a couple church ladies, and I was just quietly praying. And I hear the sounds of air raid sirens, right? I mean, and so instantly I hear this sound. And I remembered, I was just like that. I was in Iraq. I was looking around. I was getting ready. I'm like, all right, here's what I'm going to do. You guys, I'm going to put you over here and hide you in the bathroom. And I'm going to figure what's going on. You know what I mean? And I was like, no, this is crazy. We're not being invaded. You know what I mean? But I heard the sound instantly. But this happens quickly. And then I stopped. I was like, no, wait. And I listened for a second. And it was the church ladies vacuuming the church outside,
Wow,
but the pitch was exactly the same pitch as the whirring up of an air raid siren, which 30 years ago happened. You know what I mean?
That's how PTSD works.
Right.
It's a very real thing.
But if the demon knows that, so what he does is he works on those things that are, most people aren't going to trigger an air raid siren. But for me, it was just enough for me to go back instantly to that memory. It could be a smell. It could be a visual. Like if you were, like dealing with cases. If you were molested by a guy that wore a green baseball cap, drove a white truck, had a Fu Manchu mustache, and used Polo, cologne.
Right.
All he has to do is put maybe 2 of those things together in one sequence, and you'll trigger, and you'll draw down into shame, right? You let the emotion pull you down. And once that emotions, because the memory and the emotions is the middle faculty. So once that emotion kicks in, he now can start to manipulate you. And oftentimes you got kids, right? What do the older brothers do to the little brothers? They grab their arm and they say, why do you keep hitting yourself? It's classic. We were trained to that, as brothers, we were trained to do that. So the demon at that point once he triggers that middle faculty of the memory and the emotions, once the emotion through the body, some visual, sound, smell, a song, some song that you knew from, suddenly you can listen to a certain song and you're in a different place. And then emotions in that lowered emotional vulnerable state, that's when he can manipulate you. And oftentimes he doesn't really care which way, what you hit yourself with, pornography, gambling, alcohol, he'll let you, he doesn't really care. You pick your own poison. I don't care what you do, as long as you beat yourself up. And this is why we say a psychological obsession can expose the soul to a spiritual oppression or obsession. I mean, I've had cases where an obsession like anything from, alcohol addiction is an obsession, smoking is an obsession, another obsession, pornography is an obsession. These obsession, even if it's obsessive thoughts, we had a church lady at a small rural parish, and she did everything for the church: Eucharistic minister, lector, DRE, teach the children, everything. Her whole identity was church lady, good church lady. Well, in a small little community, words get out, and her husband had an affair. And it devastated her. It crushed her because she had built her identity up as a church lady. And now everybody's talking about, in her mind, because here's the demon, because her emotions were here, and who knows what went into that? Who knows if there was infidelity in her own home and her family or whatever? Who knows if this was the 8th time? We don't know. We just know that she went to this low emotional state and had this psychological obsession. Within 6 weeks, she had a spiritual obsession. Spiritual obsession.
So just like a predator looks for people who are vulnerable,
Yeah.
You find the nerdy weird kid or somebody who needs, that predators know who to go after, who are vulnerable, right? The devil is looking for your vulnerabilities, and that's where that data set comes in. He's looking to connect those dots to where it brings your guard down. It makes you weak. It makes you ashamed. It makes you lose hope or faith, and then he can attack, and he can more take possession of you once your defenses are down because he accessed those data sets. Fair enough?
Fair enough.
All right. So
is a good analogy is we were pilots before GPS and all that. We if you want to do an extraction or you want to bring some fire support down, you would have the guys on the ground would pop smoke, right? They would pop purple smoke, and we'd call, okay, I see you over there, and you couldn't drop a pin, back in the day. And so, okay, I see purple smoke coming your way, whatever. And so I see it, but so does the bad guys. Everybody in the battlefield sees the purple smoke. So now it's a race to get there. Or they're in parts of the West, ranching communities, it's legal to coyotes because coyotes decimate the population, the livestock, big game. And so what ranchers do, they'll bring hunters in, or they'll do it themselves. They actually, you can download it. It's an app it's called a coyote call, and it projects sounds of dying rabbits, wounded puppies, a hurt chicken. Right. Whenever I play this at a parish, the women always go, "Oh," I'm like, "Don't do that." Don't do that, right? Be careful. So it's this. So I had a lady once say, "I was so worried. All I did was pray." Right. And I said, "Well, not necessarily, because that worry emotion can't occupy the same space as prayer. So you're praying, yes, God hears that, but you're projecting into the cosmos the sound of a dying rabbit." You're projecting a vulnerability, and that's what attracts the demon. The demon is attracted to vulnerabilities. It's attracted to anything inconsistent with the indelible mark of baptism.
So you explained beautifully the idea of disassociating your emotional response to these events and linking it to Christ's passion.
Right.
That's a beautiful explanation of how somebody needs to deal with these, whether they're repressed memories that have come back or whether they are these triggers that they have. They have to learn how to disconnect their emotions and link it to Christ. Help me understand that better.
Yeah. So if the demon now does battle, it's that middle faculty of the emotions and the memory. If learning, in that faculty, that's where the battle takes place. And so learning to separate the emotion from the memory. And it's hard to do. And it isn't just a gut check. This is where redemptive suffering comes in. The value of redemptive suffering. I use Maria Goretti as the example, one who suffered perfectly, well, one of the saints, that suffered in this way in defense of her purity. But the separating the emotion from the memory, and the only way to do that, a way to do that, an effective way, is to link your suffering with the sufferings of Christ. Link that suffering. So somewhere it's an act of the will. Offering up your suffering. You suffered at the hands of. I suffered at the hands of one man. You bore the sins of all humanity. I had a guy say, well, everybody's accusing me of this. My wife is afflicted and they're saying I'm doing this, and they're making up all this stuff around me. And I said, yeah, I know a guy one time that was innocent. He was so innocent, they called him the spotless lamb.
Wow.
And he was actually God. And he was a carpenter, and they ridiculed him. They spit in his face, So linking that suffering, I had a 1 year, being fair skinned, and I was a runner, military guy. So I had a dermatologist did this thing on my face where it just, I don't know if you've ever seen it, just fry your face and all the precancer stuff. Then they go in there and they burn it all off, So I was dropping something off at our Carmelite monastery in our diocese, and I stopped into the sisters, and I wasn't going to I was going to work from home for a couple of days because I looked like Quasimodo, you know. And so the sister, the sister that received me said, and I think, she's she's not going to say anything, right? I'm just going to drop this stuff off. And she said, what happened to your face?
Of course she did.
Yeah.
Because he's very comfortable in
right,
saying
yeah, exactly. That's the way
if I saw you, I would pretend like I didn't see it.
pretend like nothing happened. You'd be like, you would go,
whoa. But a nun can speak truth.
Yeah. So I said, I explained, the dermatologist and precancer, whatever. And she said, it's beautiful. Because it was Ash Wednesday. And I said, beautiful? She said, yeah, you're starting Lent. And now every time you look at your face and it looks really bad, she said, you can think about how they spit in our Lord's face.
Wow. Yeah.
And they spit in his face, God. And so now
that's linking.
Yes. So I was like, yeah.
That's
so you mortify those little things,
yeah.
And it strengthens the will and it breaks. So now when you're linking your suffering to the suffering of Christ, the demon's going to find a softer target. When you watch in the Discovery Channel and you see this pack of wildebeest and the lion's chilling, he can take any one of them. The guy in the front with the tattoo and the spiked hair, he's the toughest one there, the alpha wildebeest. He could take that guy, but the one that straggles, the one his glasses are falling and he's got his leg taped up and he's like, wait for me, guys. That's the one. He's going to go for the one that's vulnerable,
Yeah.
And if he gets in the middle of that pack, he knows the wildebeest have a chance because they're going to turn their backs on him and they're going to try to kick him to death. So he might as well. The predator is going to. He's an opportunist. He's going to take the easiest target. So you just have to be aware that that's what he's looking for.
9 choirs of angels. Demons are angels. I suspect that some of each choir fell from heaven.
Yeah.
Does a difference come out in exorcism? Seraphic demon versus a cherub demon versus a whatever, I don't know the exact words for it. Do we call them that if they're still demons? I don't know. But you understand my question. Yeah.
Most of the possessing demons are the lower choirs. It's suspected in some of the writings of the fathers that a third of the angels fell.
Yeah.
We know that, but it was equal from each choir, which is very interesting.
Huh.
It was Saint Bede, or Bede the Venerable, that said, gives him the reason why the demon hates us. And he's describing the Feast of All Saints Day. And on the Feast of All Saints Day, I forget what, like 750 AD, there was an iconoclastic heresy going through, and they were destroying and getting rid of all of these relics. And so they brought back to Rome like 28 wagon loads of relics to preserve them, and they put them into the Pantheon. You know where the Pantheon is?
Yeah.
Beautiful church
there not too long ago.
And they dropped the rose petals there on Pentecost. And there's, the first century martyr relics there in this church. And so the Pantheos, all the gods, this former pagan temple became the church of Mary and the martyrs and all the martyrs. So, and for Bede, this showed the tradition of the church, that, and remember, doctor of the church, that the choirs that were vacated by the fallen angels were replaced by the saints. And so this explains his deep hatred for us. When the demons, when Satan, using the typology of the fathers from Ezekiel and Isaiah, non serviam, I will not serve, right? How far have you fallen on a morning star, right? Lucifer, the light bearer, right? So the speculation, the highest of angels. I will not serve a God that takes a form lower than me. And then God exalts us as his children to take the choirs that vacated. That describes his sincere hatred for us. So, but most of the lower choir, the archangels, principalities, archangels, and angels, the bottom choir, lower means really closer to us, where the higher ones focus around the throne of God.
Guardian angels are sort of lower in the choirs.
But don't think of lower as lesser anymore.
Right.
Is your wife lesser than you?
No,
not at all. But closer to us. So the guardian angels
are closer to us, and they were assigned to us.
That's true.
From the beginning of time, I guess.
Yeah, but they were assigned to us. They have specific tasks.
Now, if they fell, are they the ones you think that attack us because they were the ones who assigned? Maybe they have a chip on their shoulder because they were supposed to be taking care of these mere nasty, mortal, corporeal creatures. And
so
maybe they have an extra chip on their shoulder.
For sure, they do. Yeah, and they hate us.
Yeah,
they hate everything about us.
Which I have another, at some point, I think in the other episode we're going to do, I'm going to talk specifically about, their disgust for the human body. We'll get to that some other time. But
so the angels, the fallen, the angels so an angel was created mission specific. St. Thomas talks about like three movements of their creation. They see themselves. They have the beatific vision. They see themselves in the light of God. They're given their assignment, right, within the hierarchy, within the choir, what their task will be, whether it's in charge of weather, whether it's in charge of a diocese, whether it's in charge of you know?
Even like dignitaries, bishops, statesmen, they have specific guardian angels.
Exactly.
And whatnot.
Territories, dioceses, churches, prelates.
And then some angels have the task of the natural elements.
Right, natural elements. So those angels that were, when they fell, that the speculation is that they retained that desire towards that which were created, but now they militate directly against it. So the guardian angels that were created, that class, would now militate against that. So if they were there to guard sacred marriage,
now they're going to attack.
Now they're going to attack marriage. If they're there to guard territories, they're going to try to disrupt.
And I think this in terms of like how these demons are interacting with us, just a question that came to my mind is when they are using the different languages, like when people start talking unknown languages that they didn't know before.
Yeah.
Do you think that's sort of like, again, on this topic of Satan just distorts what God always did? Do you think that's like flipping upside down the gift of speaking in tongues?
Or Babel,
Or Babel.
Yeah.
Okay. All right,
or Pentecost.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. Everything the devil does is a diabolic inversion.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And that's kind of the segue into the book I'm working on generational spirits, or inherited guilt. We'll talk about that later. But a curse isn't like we have this, we give the devil too much credit in the sense that, you have these curses and then there's blessings and there's curses. And so they're like these equal forces against each other, like the United States versus Iraq or whatever, football teams, whatever. A curse is just the privation of the protection and the provision that comes with blessing. Blessing has two ends. Authority. Authority has two ends: to provide and to protect. And to live under one's blessing is to have provision and protection. And then when that is abdicated for various reasons, there is now a privation of that provision and protection. And that is what a curse really is. So a curse is to blessing as darkness is to light. Where there is no light, darkness comes in and fills that void.
I love it. Beautiful articulation of these things. There's so much more we're going to get into in another episode, but I say for now, we go have some lunch.
That sounds good. We are bodily creatures after all. We need to eat. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Schneider. It was really quite remarkable. Thank you.
Thank you.